Hi friends, host Eric here. Host of Talking with Fat People. Talking about addictions, the different kinds of addictions and different ways which people think about addictions. So, any objective, reasonable observer would call me an addict of various sorts. I smoke weed all day long. I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I don't drink alcohol at all. That's an addiction as well. You know, it's like I have a very specific relationship with a drug. It's not, most people, it's not, they don't consider their relationship with drug X as a significant part of their identity in any sense. They don't create a separate category for that because they see themselves as, first and foremost, a person who does shit with the random, infinite possible things you could choose to deal with in the world, including, ordering steak or getting alcohol or not getting alcohol. Why would you make such a big deal about that one? It's like there's that kind of non-addiction focus about missing the point. That the reason about the alcohol has nothing to do with its food quality or something. Anyway, as somebody who's addicted to cigarettes, for sure, this is the only thing I think I would agree that I'm addicted to. By my understanding of the word addiction is one that limits the term to there are going to be some sort of symptoms if you stop doing it that are actual withdrawal symptoms. So not just like I want that, but significant enough. I mean, it's going to be a sliding scale thing. It's not a binary distinction. It's when something qualifies as an addiction versus not quite it, but there has to be a physical component to it. So I have physical withdrawal symptoms if I don't have nicotine for long enough. I'm addicted to cigarettes. The mental stuff, it really depends on a lot of different factors. How much I fiend, How much am I fiending for a cigarette depends on, I am fiending for a cigarette is a reality that will not change and will get more intense, but how I go about manifesting that fiending varies significantly depending on a lot of different factors. So it's not something that be meaningfully used to determine whether you're addicted to something per se, but it's that throbbing insistence underneath that I have to have this thing. That qualifies as an addiction to me. And I've never had that about anything except cigarettes. I don't think I was ever even addicted to alcohol. I wanted alcohol a lot. Sometimes I want tobacco a lot. Sometimes I still want alcohol. Or sometimes I want, not tobacco. Sometimes I want weed a lot. Sometimes I want speed a lot. Sometimes I want alcohol. Sometimes I want lots of things. But I'm not addicted to them in the sense that not getting it compels me to behave in the same way that food, for example, or cigarettes do. I will get hangry. I may or may not do a good job of dealing with that hanger, but it's involuntary. If I go long enough without food, my response is anger and then probably despair and hopelessness. I don't know. I need food. I need cigarettes like that. I don't need any other drugs like that. I may want them very badly, but I do not need them. So that to me is the difference between an addiction and not an addiction. And being a grown-up means saying, yeah, I really want Coke tonight, but whatever, I'm not going to go any great lengths to get it. I mean, I don't want Coke usually. It's just an example. I'm not a Coke fan, although last time I did it, I liked it. But again, I liked it. Wanting something and needing it are different. And when you're genuinely addicted to something, it means you need it. In ways that are beyond just like, but I really, 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 really want it. That's not addiction. That's you being a baby. So, I'm a baby all the time, by the way. I mean, I'm not condemning it. I'm just saying let's not lie to ourselves about it. Just because you give in to your being a baby doesn't mean you're addicted to something. I'm not giving in to being a baby when I smoke cigarettes. If I want to kick them, I need to change who I am in some fashion. Like, I have to approach... That's a serious business. If I want to kick cigarettes, it's a serious business. Everything else, I cycle off. It's just that easy. It's not a willful thing. It just happens. Okay, so I don't mean to say it's easy for me to choose to cycle off at any moment. Well, I can choose to stop this at any moment. I don't want to do that at all. There are lots of times when I really, really want to keep doing what I'm doing. And then there will come a time when I'm, okay, I need to cycle off now. I'm going to say, it just happens. It's a natural function of my need for change. Because I'm not addicted to those things. I just really like them. And the difference being, and it's true of coffee too. I don't always have coffee. It's the only other thing that I could kind of close to say I'm addicted to is caffeine, maybe. But I would say if it were, it would be the mildest, strangest addiction in history, and completely unlike any other. Unlike cigarettes, unlike food. I'm addicted to food. I need to eat. I'm addicted to cigarettes. I'm addicted to sleep. Cigarettes is probably the only addiction I have that I could actually change. I could change my relationship to the other addictions I have, but I couldn't get rid of it entirely. I mean, that's the thing about cigarettes too. You never stop being addicted to cigarettes. You just change your relationship with the addiction. Just like alcohol. I've never addicted to alcohol. Like any substance, right? So I am addicted to cigarettes, so I can change my relationship with the addiction. But I have to treat alcohol as though it were an addiction because it's approximate enough, or any kind of drug. I sort of imagine it as a noun that I can then deal with, because I can't deal with it if it's just a choice. It has to represent a status of some sort. Otherwise, it's impossible to make meaning out of it. So, since I'm meaning driven first and foremost, I'm a metaphysical actor, and I'm dealing with the consequences of my physical choices that have mostly only metaphysical impacts. It's not like I'm building a house with my time, or it's not like I'm building, let's say, a shelf with my time. If I do that, and I have a shelf at the end, that shelf, I incur all the physical consequences of that. Now, that might mean now that I'm so glad I spent the time doing that, because now we have this place to put things, and I didn't used to have a place right here to put things. Isn't that convenient? Now when I come to look in this mirror, I can put shit on this shelf. That's possible physical consequence. Or another possible physical consequence is, God damn it, I keep banging my elbow on this shelf. I wish I hadn't fucking put it here. What an idiot I am. Regardless, you're spending your time, your physical choice-making energies on things that have consequences in the physical world for you. While we think about those things in metaphysical terms, oh, it sure is convenient. The actual positive is not the fact that it has the status of convenient, but rather that it actually is convenient. Okay? Whereas a lot of shit doesn't work like that. A lot of shit, what matters is the status. It doesn't matter what the actual thing is. So, there are these two worlds that operate under different rules. It doesn't matter whether I was actually being nice to you. It matters that I'm not saying anything about whether you were being nice to me. I'm saying they think you're a wife abuser because of the way that you did this and made it look like blah, blah, blah to them. So in that instance, it doesn't matter. We're not talking about any actual thing. We're saying the actual thing we're talking about is status management. And that actually is bad here. And it actually does matter in the actual world what the status is. it doesn't link back to a physical referent in the same fashion that the shelf does. And so it is with addiction as well. Cigarettes are like a shelf. They're a real thing. I have an actual addiction. It's persistent throughout time in the sense that it won't. It's not like, boy, it sure is convenient I've come up with this way to shorthand think about these other things. Because it's a tool then for me to use. I'm using it. It's not, and it takes no permanence as a consequence from me. Building a shelf takes a permanence as a consequence. When I changed the direction of the mirror, one of the most brilliant things I've ever done is so simple, and probably somebody with good TE would think of it right away. I changed the direction of the mirror so that we would stop banging our heads when we used to open the mirror. It would stay open because it was open sideways like this, and you lean over and you set it up and you bang your head on the fucking mirror. Kim banged her head on really bad one time, and I said, "I'm taking that mirror off." She said no because of looks, and I said, "Fine, I'll change the direction of it." Moved it up and down. So now, after you can't leave it open. It's not possible. Gravity closes it. Even if you did leave it open, it would be a line wrong for you to hit your head on it in a way that hurts because it would lift it up further when you hit your head on it. That 5 minutes of time I spent changing the thing around has paid massive dividends forevermore. It was an actual change. It wasn't simply dealing with statuses. I did not change the status of things so that from now on I made it so when we hit our heads we can think about these positive impacts of that. I made it like, here's some narrative benefits. Here's some pretend story benefits for you for hitting your head. And that's the thing. People are getting those things confused all the time. When we talk about addiction, a failure to distinguish between those two fundamental worlds is what causes all the miscommunication about it. There's a difference between giving me stories and preventing an ongoing habitually bad occurrence from happening again. It's just a difference. And some things, they need story solutions because they're story-based problems. Like, I feel bad about how I acted last night. Well, you probably need some story-based solutions because you can't go back and change that, right? You can't undo what you did and do something else instead. It was a physical action, it means it wasn't in the conditional realm. So you need some story-based solutions. But if I tell you, I keep doing this stupid shit, then once you figure out why you keep doing it, like what is it, what is the thing what is the need this thing meets in the moment, and how can it alternately be met, and or can it? Maybe it can't, then in which case you have to accept that that's how shit is, and probably switch sides and advocate in favor of it. It's probably the best course of action then if you figure it's not worth the... you got to be smart about it. You got to deal with all of your addictions, and everybody's got shit tons of them, of all different sorts, which means real addictions are few and far between. Food, sleep, cigarettes, heroin if you're addicted to heroin, or anything you got real withdrawal symptoms on. Most of those addictions that are chosen addictions, in other words, it's actually possible to live without them. You're probably better off without them, but everybody's got to choose that themselves. Once you've chosen to make, and you probably chose before you even had the ability to really choose, once you've chosen to make a specific substance part of your identity, and that's what you're doing. When we do substances, we are not taking on these things that are external to us. We are making ourselves in a way that includes these things. And sometimes to our own detriment, sometimes to the detriment of the overall self, sometimes to whatever. Those are narrative problems. Those are narrative issues that need story solutions. If I'm stealing money to buy drugs, we don't need to get any further than stealing money. After that, you're talking about stories. You're not talking about real things anymore. We're talking about stories. You can tell stories about the problem, about why it exists or whatever, or we could do something about it. What do you need to do in the case? Oh, he's stealing money. You need to stop stealing money is the problem, right? And if within an individual person, they go, well, I'm devoting too much of my attention to this one aspect of my identity, namely this drug. Then they have to work out the solution to that. And there's a lot of different possible ways to work out solutions to that. But number one thing is, whatever your stories are irrelevant to the problem. You transgressed. I mean, you fucked somebody over. You did something bad to somebody. You committed something that you can't it takes you out of the land. You can no longer use words to defend yourself. Basically, you can't make arguments anymore. There's no arguments to be made. It's not about arguments anymore. So, it certainly is not about drugs. To the extent that it is, words don't matter. And stop doing the drugs. That's it. Your stories are irrelevant at that point. If you really believe the story that your drugs are causing you to steal, then you're not going to get rid of drugs from your life. You're going to change their narrative role in your life. You're going to say, now I'm in opposition to those things that were the source of my badness. And if that's how you want to do the narrative work to redeem yourself, great. That's fine. I'm not going to sit there and tell you that's not a viable narrative redemption path for you. But remember that you're not saying anything about drugs. You're talking about you. You're not talking about your relationship with drugs. You're talking about you. You're saying, I'm choosing to express the self not in accompaniment with... We're always expressing self in accompaniment with something, in contrast with something, in juxtaposition with something. We don't exist as objects against no field. We don't exist as isolated objects that have definition independent of themselves without any contrast. No, obviously, you're constantly, unavoidably manifesting the self in accordance with other considerations that are part of the self, that are extensions of the self, etc. So it's not just drugs and alcohol. It's things like, well, who's around? Is somebody watching or not? I was standing out there tripping out about that earlier, about like talking about how, to myself, about the nature of conditionality. So that, or the things I was thinking out there were conditional. They were conditional because, to me, they hadn't actually been rendered as things I said because there wasn't an audience. I come back in here, I say it, presumably to an audience. I see who am I actually talking to? I'm talking to a couple of boxes on a screen, and one of them I have faith is recording what I'm saying so that somebody in theory can watch it later, but I never watch it. So I never check to see if anybody else watches it. So the important thing, the only thing that matters, is that conditionally it can be watched. In other words, it matters to me that it exists as a status of watchable, then it's rendered as real, because in other words, it's communicable to others. Whereas as long as things are in the physical realm, that is to say incommunicable to others, I understand them to be not real. So the thing is, that's the core distinction. That's the core way that people misunderstand. This is why people fight with each other. That's what I mean to say. This is why people fight with each other. It's because some people think shit's not real until it's rendered into abstraction and is thus communicable to others, and therefore we can deal with it. Other people say, as soon as shit's been rendered into abstraction, it's not real anymore, because it's just a representation of the thing. It's not the thing itself. But of course, in order to be communicable, things need to be not the things themselves. Just as you aren't actually in the room listening to me, you're experiencing an approximation of that. Why? Because if you had to go to the room to, this is a minor amount of compression, but this degree of compression is what abstract and metaphysical distinction, physical distinction is all about. It's about compression such that we can experience more than we can experience. It's like I can node shit out. I can meaning pack it into a little sausage and have a whole bunch of those things, and thus come to have understandings of experiences not my own, thus enriching my own identity, not necessarily my own experience. Again, it depends on what you prioritize. People are either going to prioritize, or value, I guess you'd say, communicability or authenticity. It's a FI thing, because the communicability one, ultimately, it's a TIFI thing. Communicability requires logic. Authenticity requires feelings. So when you're dealing with addiction, and that's what this video is about, you have to understand it in both terms, and you have to give each its respective dominion and afford impacts according to its own framework if you're going to impact it correctly. In other words, if you're going to have outcomes that are most consistent with what you authentically want, what is intuitively true, NI true, what's going to resonate with everybody's SI epistemologies, or your own, most importantly, what's going to actually change the board, SE, how to change the board more effectively, TE. All these considerations are coming to play with addiction. So the thing about it is, real addictions, they're part of you. I'm the player. I've arrived at this addiction. Most things that people position as addictions are actually behaviors by the person. They're moves in the game. They're not part of the player. I'm not making moves in the game when I don't choose to smoke cigarettes. I think, you know what? I'm going to go buy a pack of cigarettes today. That'll be fun. That'll be a change of pace. I go, I still haven't gone and got cigarettes. I gotta go get cigarettes. I'm starting to freak out here. The cigarette police standing there with its gun out. There's no... Well, what cigarette police standing there with his gun out? It's part of my identity. Just like, I couldn't stand if I had to sit here and go, I think your really stupid thing you just said is really valuable, and oh yes sir, I'm learning a lot from you right now. You're saying a bunch of stupid shit. I'm supposed to do some sort of FE like lapdog shit. If I had to do that for an extended period of time, it would drive me crazy because of who I am. Same with cigarettes. If I had to go without cigarettes for a long time, it would drive me crazy because of who I am. Now, unlike every other part of who I am, I can actually, in theory, excise this. It doesn't change the fact that it's part of who I am. And this is an important consideration when we're dealing with it in terms of any of the other evaluatory strategy. So you could deal with it, an addiction from a self-help perspective and say, okay, I'm talking about an addiction as something that's an aspect of self that I would like to optimize. It would be the most accurate way to talk about that. Say, if it's a real addiction, they're part of myself I'd like to optimize. I know I'll never stop being addicted to cigarettes because they're part of my identity. I'm never gonna stop being the guy who once had an appendix. I still have a relationship to my appendix. My relationship with my appendix it's gone. It doesn't make me never having had one. Now, people who aren't addicted to cigarettes, it's like they never had an appendix. people who are addicted to cigarettes, your appendix can come and go periodically, but you're an appendix haver. One way or the other. What? I should read the chat. I see. Hello. That person's not there. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't regret having cigarettes part of my identity. I just don't know if I may wish at some point to change my relationship with cigarettes such that it becomes the thing I contrast against rather than the comfort that I continue to manifest. Yes, darling! Okay, I'm coming. I gotta go inside. I don't even know what I'm doing out here anymore. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm making a video. So that explains addiction, everybody. That explains addiction, okay? That completely massive non-addiction explains addiction.